For the most part, I really enjoyed Doctor Who Season 1. There were some fantastic performances, fantastic scenes, fantastic episodes. But there was one consistent problem, and it's a pretty big problem that not just myself, but almost the entire internet, well, Twitter at least, has been very frustrated at. And sadly, it appears that that problem isn't going away anytime soon. Now, what am I actually referring to? Because I'm not one of these nutjobs online going, "Oh, the show's gone woke," or any of that stuff, nor am I referring to viewing figures. I'm more referring to the fact that ever since Russell T Davies introduced the salt into Doctor Who, he's kind of had the same attitude that this Simpsons clip displays.
Pleased to explain it.
Yeah. Well, whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it.
Yes, but in episode AG4...
Wizard.
Just replace wizard with salt, or just because the show or the plot required it. Why was Ruby's mum wearing a medieval cloak if she was just a woman who'd had a teen pregnancy and was giving away her child?
Why Louise Miller wore an ancient medieval cloak to the church?
Yeah.
Because she had to be for the sake of the story.
Why do they break into song and dance at the end of The Devil's Chord? And we do actually have a quote and a bit of cut script from The Devil's Chord later in the video, so make sure you're staying tuned, because we do actually have the original answer to why they break into song, which was deleted from the episode for some bizarre reason. Why does Mrs. Flood keep staring into the camera? Well, we'll talk about that, because Russell has addressed that directly, and it didn't go down well. But you get my point. Just going to jump in quickly here. If you aren't already subscribed to this channel, please consider doing so. It's full of Doctor Who content, everything you could want. We've got fan films on the way, trailers, reaction videos, the range. Also, you could become a channel member if you want some extra behind the scenes stuff and exclusive vlogs. Even the ending of 73 Yards, it's ghost story logic. It didn't give me answers. Now, I'm not saying I want everything in Doctor Who answered. Not every single little thing needs to have a description. So before you come at me in the comments and go, "Oh, but in 2008, the Midnight Entity, no, I know that wasn't explained. Don't get me wrong, that was cool. But imagine Turn Left. A brilliant episode of Doctor Who, one of my favourites in fact. Imagine Turn Left, but you cut all of the trickster Beetle stuff with the Doctor at the end, and maybe even cut a little bit of the explanation at the start. It is literally just Donna in a kind of parallel universe, and at the end all of her memories go, and the whole story ended up being a parallel timeline that kind of meant nothing. I honestly believe that those 2 minutes at the end where the Doctor goes, "This is a Beetle from the Tricksters Brigade, it latched onto you, that kind of makes the episode. I do get that this is entirely an opinion thing, but in my opinion, I want those answers. I want to know why and what was just created. I don't want everything. We should never know what the woman was saying to make Ruby's family run away. That would ruin the mystery. But how did it even happen? Why does stepping on a fairy circle mean that all of this... Do you know what I mean? There were no explanations at all. Like, even, why is Sutek a big dog? He was a guy in a mask, and I mean, Russell said in an interview that having a guy in a mask isn't as dramatic or cool anymore, and I slightly get where he's coming from, but if it's a tall guy in a big mask that towers above the rest, maybe a little bit like Thanos but with a mask, I don't know, I still think it entirely works. Just jumping in here during the edit process because I forgot, I don't know why I said Thanos in a mask, Darth Vader. Are you telling me that Darth Vader is not a threatening villain in 2024? Because, I mean, in Rogue One, I know that was a couple of years ago, but Darth Vader still slaps, and that's just a tall guy in a mask. Yes, I do realise that the mask was part of Sutek's imprisonment, etc, but it's such an iconic look. It would be like bringing back Omega, but without the mask. It just doesn't quite work. But let's dive into some articles which I flung really far on my chair there. Some articles which we have from the Radio Times. First up, that cutscene from The Devil's Chord. I hear you crying, you asking, why on earth did everybody break into song? Well, Russell T Davies said there's one scene we deliberately cut at the end of The Devil's Chord, actually, because they run onto the rooftop, and there was a scene where the Doctor said, oh, time's gonna go crazy now, music is flooding back in, and everything's gonna be strange for 10 minutes, to kind of explain why they burst into song. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like this would have eased into the musical number so much better than the actual episode did. When I watched it, I enjoyed the musical number, but I was sat there going, what? I was baffled, almost too surprised to take in what was happening. And this scene would have been a matter of about 30 seconds, but I think it's so vital. The scene was actually shot, and when they watched it back, they decided that it was boring. Davies added, why explain, you just burst into song? So I think that scene possibly would have made a lot of people happy, i.e. me, a miserable Doctor Who fan on the internet. But Russell is really glad he took it out. It's only 20 seconds of dialogue, it was nothing. And I can't think of anything else that we cut. Okay, if it was nothing, why couldn't it have just been kept in? 20 seconds to satisfy your irritating fan base, Russell. I just think it would have acted as a really nice bit of connective tissue, going from that big final, the Beatles and the Doctor and Ruby defeat Maestro. It's like how the Doctor says, oh, we're still in a state of play in the giggle. It's a nice, quick little bit, I mean, it's a matter of 20 seconds, just a quick little bit of dialogue, and you could have even had the score building up to it while the Doctor says, Ruby, bear with me, time's gonna go a bit crazy, and maybe he even gets cut off and starts singing himself. Something like that, I think, would just, it eases the audience into it a little bit more. I also worry that for a casual audience, because this era is kind of designed to bring in new audiences, for a casual audience, is it a bit too wacky to start doing all of this crazy stuff straight away? Do they need a little bit of connective tissue? I know that when my family watched it, my mum did go, but why are they singing now? But then maybe that's because certain people who are Doctor Who fans are just used to the lore and the rules of the show. Maybe, actually, Russell is right, and a general audience who've literally never seen Doctor Who before won't question it. They'll just go, oh, it's Doctor Who. This song makes sense. And I can't lie, I don't mind it as much for The Devil's Chord. But episodes like 73 Yards are really where I do want more answers, and a big character that I want answers for is Mrs. Flood. Now, Russell says that Mrs. Flood's breaking of the fourth wall might never be explained. When asked about it, Russell says that hasn't been explained, and it might never be, frankly. It's very interesting. Within the Doctor Who offices, we know exactly why that happens, and yet I'm showing no sign of putting that on screen. This is a quote which has angered a lot of Twitter, and I can't lie, I kind of agree with Russell on this. I'm in two minds. While it would be nice for Mrs. Flood to not, I don't think she should ever look into the camera and go, I am a mysterious character, that's why I'm breaking the fourth wall. Her breaking the fourth wall makes sense stylistically. Like, she's a bit of a zany character, but the only thing that will really bug me, if Mrs. Flood isn't a god, isn't any form of, like, otherworldly being, if she is just a creepy old woman, then I think the answers and explanation just, it needs to kind of make sense. Like, for example, when Maestro kind of breaks the fourth wall by winking at the camera, you get it. You're like, oh, I don't want an explanation to that other than Maestro is a god. Obviously, they're gonna be able to, like, break down the rules of logic and break the fourth wall, wink at the camera. So stylistically, if she's a god, I'm completely on board with this. I don't think we need an explanation, which I'm aware may sound contradictory, because I've just sat here going, I want answers, and now I'm going, why would you give me answers? The life of a Doctor Who fan. But what's also interesting is Russell continued, there's actually a reason for it that was in a very early draft of the Star Beast. Mrs. Flood wasn't even in the Star Beast, so I put my thinking cap on and thought back to when Russell said that originally in the Star Beast, the Meep was going to be breaking the fourth wall, kind of. So while Rose was in the toy shed in early drafts of the script, it wasn't a secret that the Meep was evil. It was a secret to the characters in the narrative, but we, the audience, would watch the Meep be all cutesy with Rose, then he'd sort of turn to camera and go, "Ooh, I have an evil plan," which, that, I can't lie, would have been quite funny. So maybe that's what he was sort of referring to here when he says that the Star Beast would have explained why fourth wall breaks are happening. Maybe it is something to do with the more supernatural aspect to the show. But touching back on what I said earlier, Russell says that his sister watches it and she doesn't blink. She doesn't actually blink when a character turns to the camera and gives them a wink. I suppose, yeah, it is a stylistic thing. A lot of shows have done that. Russell even goes on to talk about the fact that it's like a show, a theatre, play, proscenium arch style, going out and delivering a monologue. It's a little bit Shakespearean, which I completely agree with. Doctor Who is far from a naturalistic show. Russell points out that if Pride and Prejudice were to have a moment where Mrs. Flood turns, I don't know why Mrs. Flood is in Pride and Prejudice, but let's say she is, she turns to the camera, breaks the fourth wall, it would be a bit bizarre. But a show like Doctor Who is wacky, it is fiction, it's silly. And especially sort of, like, Stephen Moffat scripts remind me a lot of sort of Shakespearean dialogue. They're not very naturalistic, and I mean that in a loving way. He is one of my favourite writers, but a lot of Stephen Moffat stuff, like, you watch it and no one would ever say that in real life. But that doesn't stop it from being really, really cool and really enjoyable. It's just the style of the show. So on this matter, I do agree, I do get it. I want Doctor Who to have more explanations, more answers. The fact that supernatural things are happening, or the fact that Russell seems to be acknowledging that this is a TV show now, doesn't just mean you can explain everything away with, well, the plot required it. It's also mentioned in the visual commentary for the Empire of Death that there was originally an explanation for the Doctor's whistle, which he uses to summon back the TARDIS. Originally, he was going to throw, like, once he put Sutek on the leash, oh dear, I just remembered that moment. Once he puts Sutek on the leash, runs into the TARDIS, he was going to sort of throw the whistle into the TARDIS console, which then becomes a kind of time loop because the whistle is in that TARDIS, which means the memory TARDIS, because it's all timelines out of order, the memory TARDIS can remember it from the TARDIS's future, which is how the Doctor gets it in the past. It's kind of a bootstrap paradox. Google it. And while I understand that that explanation is a bit wordy, I do feel like it's kind of in the DNA of Doctor Who as a show. Like, if it's written well and performed well, I absolutely love clever little time-travel-y moments like that. He goes like, "Oh, I love my whistle," and the whistle just kind of comes out of nowhere in the final cut of the episode, which I do think is a shame. I just hope that season 2 stops deleting scenes and cutting moments, because they are actually being recorded and they would satisfy a lot of fans. But also, I do understand Russell and the team's apprehension on not explaining everything. By no means should you leave this video thinking, Joe the Confused Adipose. I never referred to myself as the Confused Adipose, that was weird. Joe wants Russell and co to explain everything. No, that's not what I mean. Keep certain mysteries, like what the woman said in 73 Yards. It's just, if you're setting up a mystery, like Ruby's mum, I think is a big point of contention as well. Like, if you're setting up Ruby's mum can't be found, her blood's not anywhere, even Davina McCall can't find Ruby's mum, and then Ruby's mum, like, and it's also the lines from Maestro, there's a hidden song inside her soul, and this creature is wrong. Why is Maestro saying that if Ruby's mum is just some random woman? Now, I understand the thinking behind it. It's a nice story arc, and it is Russell's response to what Star Wars did with Rey. And I appreciate that, because I do think making Rey Palpatine kind of was a bit stupid. If you're gonna promise us that this character is incredibly important, and there is a big difference between the way Rey was promised in The Force Awakens and Ruby was promised throughout the season. I mean, if you look at Rey in The Force Awakens, it is Rey herself who places the importance on finding her parents. So when Rey finds out in The Last Jedi that actually her parents were nobodies, it's not the narrative that is pulling the rug from under you. It's more so Rey's character arc. It makes sense for her. Whereas it wasn't just Ruby. Obviously, Ruby was putting importance on it, but it wasn't just Ruby putting the mystery of her mum into the show. It was every character. As I say, Maestro is the prime example. Even Sutek. Why did Sutek care so much if Ruby's mum was just some random person? Especially when the plot, like the answers we do get, kind of have to cheat, because as I said earlier in the video, Russell just goes, oh, she was wearing a cloak because the plot required it, or maybe she was shrouded by time. If she was shrouded by time, say it. Put it in the show, or simply don't have her in a cloak. Like, do you know what I mean? You can't promise answers and then pull the rug away from people and sort of go, well, obviously she was just a random person. Why was she in a cloak? Why was Maestro scared of her? And why did Sutek care? Well, none of it matters because character drama, it's a little bit narratively unsatisfying. And there has been a lot of talk as well, because Russell is quoted as saying that he did that plotline to generate content, which is literally mission achieved. It is videos like this that Russell wanted. It was theory videos and internet speculation saying, who is Mrs. Flood? Who is this character? But as long as the story pays it off well, that doesn't matter. But if the story just does it for the sake of generating content, then that's a big problem. But I think there is a beautiful middle ground to be met. Sort of content creation, because to do that in the modern world, that's how a show survives. And Doctor Who's kind of always done that, like Bad Wolf is a mystery box. Obviously there wouldn't have been YouTubers in 2005 discussing Bad Wolf, because I think the platform was like a month old. But it's the same sort of thing. And Russell used to be brilliant at blending content creation mystery boxes and actually answering them in a satisfying way. So here's hoping that season 2 can go back to what used to happen in the good old days. I feel like a proper old man now. And maybe the young generation of kids watching this show for the first time, like we all did with New Who in 2005, are gonna think I'm an annoying classic fan complaining on the internet. But who knows? Only time will tell. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. This has been a much longer video than I expected it to be, but the discussions just kept going and going and going. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy, please do remember to like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill. Goodbye.